One of the biggest questions you'll face in retirement is how to turn a lifetime of savings into a reliable paycheck. You've done the hard work, right? You've built that nest egg. But now, how do you actually pay yourself from it? How do you do it without running out of money? Or, on the flip side, without living way more frugally than you actually need to? Today, we are going to walk through the best ways to solve this exact problem. So, here's our game plan. First, we're going to really define the core problem that every single retiree has to figure out. Then we'll look at three of the most popular strategies you've probably heard about: fixed withdrawals, the bucket strategy, and of course, the famous 4% rule. We'll see what's good about them, but also where they fall short. And finally, I'm going to introduce you to a much more flexible approach called guardrails and show you how it can build a complete dynamic retirement plan that actually adapts with you and your life. All right, let's dive right in with the central challenge. How do we transform that nest egg you've so carefully built over the years into a steady stream of income that you can count on for the rest of your life? This is the fundamental question, right? You might think, well, I just take money out of my 401k to pay the bills. And yeah, on the surface, it's that simple, moving money from your savings to your checking account. But the real question, the one that matters, is how do you know you're taking out the right amount? And that's where withdrawal strategy comes in. Just think of it as your personal rule book for paying yourself. And having a smart strategy is absolutely crucial because without one, you face three major risks. The first, and the one everyone fears, is running out of money by spending too much too soon. The second is the complete opposite, living a needlessly restrictive lifestyle because you're just too afraid to spend. And the third is paying thousands in unnecessary taxes simply by taking money from the wrong accounts at the wrong time. Now, when you start looking for a simple way to do this, well, it can get pretty overwhelming fast. This slide, it just shows a handful of the strategies out there. There are literally more than 25 different approaches people talk about, so it's no wonder so many people feel confused. Let's try to simplify things and just look at a few of the most common ones. Okay, first up is the fixed dollar withdrawal strategy. And as the name suggests, its main appeal is its simplicity. So here's the game plan, step by step. First, you figure out a starting amount, usually somewhere between 3 and 5% of your total savings. Then, you withdraw that exact same dollar amount every single year for a set period of time, let's say for 5 years. Once that period's over, you take a look at your portfolio, reassess, and then set a new fixed amount for the next 5 years. So let's put some real numbers to this to make it clear. Imagine you have $1 million portfolio. If you pick a 5% rate, that means you'd pay yourself $50,000 for the year. You could break that down into monthly paychecks. It sounds beautifully simple, right? But this simplicity, it hides two really big risks that can derail your retirement. The appeal is obvious, it's simple, but the problems are pretty significant. First off, there's inflation. That fixed $50,000 buys you less and less stuff each year. But the bigger danger is what happens when the market drops. If your $1 million portfolio falls to, say, $700,000, that fixed $50,000 withdrawal is suddenly a much higher percentage of your portfolio. It's over 7%. Taking out that much, especially during a market downturn, is how you can get into real trouble and run out of money much faster than you planned. Okay, so let's move on to our next common strategy, the bucket strategy. This approach is all about organizing your money based on when you think you're going to need it. A pretty simple version of this uses 3 buckets. Bucket number 1 is for your immediate needs. It holds about 2 to 3 years of spending money in really safe things like cash or a money market account. Bucket 2 is for the medium term. Think years 4 through 10. And it holds a balanced mix of investments. And then bucket 3 is for the long term. Money you won't need to touch for over a decade, so it can be invested more aggressively in things like stocks for growth. The biggest benefit here is really psychological. Just knowing you have a few years of cash sitting there in bucket 1 can help you sleep a lot better at night, even when the stock market is going crazy. But the downside is complexity. Juggling these buckets, deciding when to refill them, it can be a hassle. And it gets even trickier with required minimum distributions. The withdrawals the government forces you to take from retirement accounts after a certain age. Those RMDs might force you to sell investments from a bucket you'd rather leave alone, which can kind of mess up your whole system. And that brings us to the big one, perhaps the most famous retirement rule of all, the 4% rule. It's talked about everywhere, but honestly, it's often misunderstood, and it gets a lot of criticism for being way too rigid. So here's how it's supposed to work. In your very first year of retirement, you withdraw 4% of your total savings. Simple enough. Then, for every year after that, you take out that same initial dollar amount, but you increase it a little bit to account for inflation. Now, here's a detail that a lot of folks forget. This whole rule assumes your portfolio stays invested in a mix of about 60% stocks and 40% bonds. Let's go back to our $1 million example. So, year one, you'd withdraw $40,000. Now, if inflation is 3% that year, then in year two, you'd withdraw $41,200. The next year, you'd adjust that new amount for inflation, and you just keep doing that year after year. Look, the 4% rule is a decent benchmark for just kind of eyeballing your savings, but it's a pretty flawed strategy for actual spending. Its main problem is that it's completely inflexible. It doesn't reflect how people actually live and spend money in retirement. It was designed to make sure a portfolio could survive a perfect storm of bad luck in the market. So the result is, for most people, in most years, it's just way too conservative. It basically forces you to live more frugally than you need to, and you risk leaving behind a much larger inheritance than you ever planned. So we've seen that these common, simple strategies, they all have some pretty big drawbacks. And this brings us to the most important question of all. Is there a better way to do this? And the answer is, yes, there is. A more advanced and flexible strategy is known as risk-based guardrails. It's a much smarter approach because it's dynamic. And what that means is it actually adapts to changes in the market, and just as importantly, changes in your life. And this analogy is just perfect. Think about guardrails on a winding highway. They're not there for you to bump into every day. They're there to keep you from accidentally going off the road on a dangerous curve. Well, this strategy does the exact same thing for your portfolio. It keeps you safely on the path to a successful retirement. What makes this strategy so powerful is that it takes a huge amount of complex information, all the details of your personal financial story, and it boils it all down to answering the three questions that truly matter to any retiree. Number one, how much can I safely spend? Number two, am I still on track? And number three, how will I know if I'm not on track? And what's the plan if that happens? Now, this is super important. You have to understand there are two types of guardrails. The one we're talking about here is the modern risk-based version. The older, traditional version is much more rigid. It can actually be even more restrictive than the 4% rule. The key difference is that the risk-based approach is holistic. It doesn't just look at your portfolio value today, it looks at your entire financial picture, your spending goals, your specific investments, and even future possibilities like long-term care costs to give you a much more realistic and personalized spending plan. And this leads us to what your retirement plan should really feel like. It shouldn't be a rigid pass or fail test. It should be a dynamic plan that gives you true confidence because you have total clarity. The advantage of a guardrails approach is crystal clear. It adapts to the market's ups and downs, it's personalized to your life, and it actually gives you the confidence, the permission really, to spend more when times are good. But maybe the biggest benefit of all is how it reduces stress. It does this by using advanced analysis, like running thousands of possible market simulations to map out potential adjustments before they ever happen. You see, the stress in retirement doesn't come from needing to adjust your spending, it comes from being surprised by it. This approach removes the surprise, so you always feel prepared. So as you think about your own financial future, I'll just leave you with this question. Is your plan like a rigid printed map? Or is it more like a dynamic GPS that can recalculate the route whenever the road ahead changes? Because making sure you have a dynamic plan, that is the real key to a confident and secure retirement. If you found this helpful, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Retirement Finance Explained, for simple and clear guidance on retirement, savings, and financial security.